Okay, so we're back with part two. So we've got our basic authentication working. We also need to deal with this link, right? So as a logged, we shouldn't see the product link until we are logged in. So in this browser, I'm logged in this one, I'm anonymous. I can't get to the products views, but we shouldn't even show anybody that that link is actually here. So we need to add a little bit of logic to our navigation bar that will show or hide that link depending on the user status. So what file do we want to modify? I will come back to the issue you raised with the image in a minute. What file do we need to modify for this? Well, we modify not for here. Where do these live? Yeah, they live in our layout file, right? There's our nav bar. So we just need an if statement in the layout file. So if we go to our shared, views, shared, and layout, right, on my line 27, here's our product link. So that shows up regardless of whether the user's logged in or not. So we just need to wrap this inside of an if statement. So we'll try if. Now there's a couple of ways we can do it. Amelia, what were you suggesting? So we don't have access to login. There's two different objects we could check that would tell us if our user is authenticated or anonymous. There's a couple of ways we could write this code. So we can either check the request object, so the HTTP request, or we can check the user object. So both of these are built into the .NET framework. So if I try my user object, notice it does show up here with a capital U. So if we pick user.identity, what would we check here? Yeah, we just check the is authenticated property. So I'll just move my product link inside of there. I'll show you the other way we can do it as well with the request object. So this is how we can check in a view if the user is anonymous or if they have logged in with user.identity.isAuthenticated. And it's a property, it's not a method. It just returns a Boolean, a true or a false. So if I go back to my browser where I'm logged in, my product link should stay here because I'm logged in. If I go to my anonymous window, and now just go back to the home page, notice our product link is gone. So when I log in, it'll appear. The product should appear here. As soon as I log out, it goes away. So that's one way of checking. There is an alternate. I'll show you the other possibility. So there's one. If we use the request object instead, request also has and is authenticated. So in one case, we're checking the request on the server, and the other, we're actually inspecting the user account itself. Both will do the same thing. Doesn't really matter. You can use either one. I tend to kind of prefer this one because it's shorter. Less typing, the better. But they'll do the same thing. So here, again, if I refresh as an anonymous user, I don't see the link. And as an authenticated user, I do. So you can use either one of those. So we use authorize in square brackets. That's if we want to check it at the controller level. We can't use that authorize in the views. Doesn't work. It'll throw an error. In the views, we have to check the is authenticated property of either the request or the user.identity object. either one of those. The user.identity is also used. Actually, we haven't looked at this. If I go to shared, we have this other file here that says a login partial. This is the piece of the nav bar that appears at the right, because we've got logic here, right? When we're anonymous, we see register and log in. And once we log in, we see hi and the username and log off. So there's obviously got to be some logic. We don't see that here. Here's our main layout. And right here, this is where it embeds our login partial. So if we look at that, so it's checking if our request is authenticated, show the hello and the log off, otherwise show register and log in. This is also how we can get the username. We use that same user.identity object. It has a built-in method called getUsername. So at any point, if we want to access the username of the logged in user, we can do it right here on line 10 with this method call. Emilio? Here? Yeah. So the request is the HTTP request made by the user to the server. So it will include things like the URL. So what is the user asks, right? So all HTTP, every web page there's a request object, right? What comes in from the browser, and the response, then there's the HTTP response from the web server. Okay, so that represents, if we maybe have a look here, right? So there's the request. So the request is made usually in one of two ways. Either the user types a URL and hits enter, right? Or they click on something that links to a page. So either one of those triggers this. There's a typo here that should say request. Either one of those triggers the request. So in the .NET framework, if we have a .NET app, that request object, it has this property that will tell us if it's an anonymous request or not. Doesn't tell us who the person is, but it does tell us, did they log into our site, yes or no? Or we can get it from user.identity. Either one will tell us if the user's logged in. Okay, so let's do one more thing with this, and then we need to deal with a small bug we have on our edit page with the uploading. So right now, everything in our products controller, all the methods are private. We can only access them if they're logged in. So I want to show you how you would override this. So what if we want to, for example, let's say we want to make this view public, but we want to hide all the links unless the user is authenticated, right? So a public user can see this page, but it's read-only. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to need to override our controller level authorize, because right now as an anonymous user, even if I try going there, right, I get kicked to the login screen, so I can't get there. So I want to be able to load this page, but not see the links. So we'll have to do two things. We're going to have to override the authentication in the method in our controller, and then we're going to have to write a couple of if statements up here and over here so that the links don't show up if the user is anonymous. So in our controller, above the index method, there's actually two ways we can do this. Either one of these annotations will make this private method public. So one way of doing it is to allow anonymous users. We add allow anonymous and build, we should then be able to load just the index method only. Can't load any of the other methods, but we should be allowed to load the index method now. So we're overriding at the method level the authorization for the whole class. So I got to build. And now if I go back here and try again in products, I should be able to load the index view, because this method is now public. I try any of the links, I'm going to get sent back to login. It's only index that I'm allowed to access. So there's two different ways we can accomplish this. So now I'm anonymous. We don't see a username. I can get to products, but as soon as I go to try to add, excuse me, I can't add, right? I can't edit. Yeah, so step one was making the page available. So yes, we now want to check, before we render any of these links, we want to check if the user's logged in or not. And if they're not logged in, we don't want to show them those links. So now we need to open up our product index view. And similar to the logic we wrote in our nav bar around the product link, we need that same logic around the create and around these links. We only want to render them if the user's logged in. So I'm going to go to my product index. So let's start here. Here's our create link. So we're going to wrap this whole little block of code inside of an if statement. So if something, so we've got two ways we can do it. What could we do here? I would hide this link unless the user's logged in. We already did it on our layout. Yep. Oops, I forgot my @ symbol. So we'll just check if our request is authenticated. We don't need to build here. We're just changing HTML code in the view. So if we go back to the window where we're not logged in and we refresh, that create new link should go away. So here I'm anonymous. So I no longer see that link to create. We'll do the same thing over here. So that's got to be inside of our loop. In this section, so I'm going to move my edit, my details, and my delete. Now, we can't have these to take out the @ symbols here. I probably need to put these separators on a new line now. I may need to. Yeah, it doesn't like that. Let's see. Still doesn't like this separator character. I'll just take them out for the moment. Think about what we need to do to get those back in. Maybe that way. We'll see if that works. Visual Studio seems. Let's just see what happens now. So now I'm not logged in, these should go away. They do. If I am logged in, Okay, let me think what's going on. I'm just going to move this TD tag inside for a minute. We'll get it right. We won't even show the last column unless the user's logged in. We'll try it this way. Ah. Oops. Now I need my... Okay. So I needed the HTML inside. So now only an authenticated user sees the links. So our page is public, but users can do different things depending on whether they're logged in or logged out. As a logged in user, I can do everything. As an anonymous user, and we could also wrap this if we wanted to. We could get rid of the column entirely. Maybe I'll do that as well. So up here, I'll do the same here. Say if we'll only show this actions heading. We won't even include that column if the user's anonymous. There's no reason to show them a heading for links that they can't see and can't use. So as far as the anonymous users know, this is just a read-only page. All they can do is view the data. Try that one more time. This should get rid of our actions column when we're anonymous. Okay, so that's what an anonymous user sees. And that's what an authenticated user sees. So controlling this access, it's a combination of setting up the rules in the controller, but then writing the logic in the views that we need to show or hide things depending on who our user is. I think for our categories, we're going to make that entirely private. So we want to add that authorized declaration at the top of our categories controller as well. You can't do anything with the categories if you are not logged in. So I'll go to my categories controller and on line 13, I want to authorize that as well. So those are the basic things for doing, the basic steps we need to take care of this. To take care of user accounts, passwords, hashing. ASP.NET Identity is going to do most of that stuff for us, and all we need to do is declare authorize on either a controller level or on a method level, and then write in any logic to show or hide elements of our HTML. So that's kind of the first step dealing with user accounts. We now want to also go to the second level. Because right now, as long as I log in, register and log in, I can still create, do anything I want. So we also want to add in roles and permissions so that not only do I have to log in, but I have to log in with an administrator account. So we'll need to do that, but I do want to come and address one issue with the logic for our edit page. Thanks for pointing it out. So here, if I want to change the price of my product, watch what happens. Right? So I'm going to put my product on sale. I'm going to lower the price and update it. We're going to have a little issue with it. So what happens if I update the price, but I already have the image here? I don't want to update. I should have to re-upload the same image, right? The image is, I already have the proper product image. So I want to just update one of the values and leave the image alone. Right? So I'm going to lower the price and save. I've now set my image to null because we didn't upload anything. So we probably should add a little bit of logic here to our edit post method, that we don't update the image name unless we have a new file to upload. So what we want to do is, when I go to edit here, we probably need to include the current image somewhere in this form and check and say, if there's no upload, we want to keep the image name the same. We don't want to wipe it out, because in effect, we've lost the path to that image. So on my edit form, I'm going to go back to products edit. So we can even add it into a simple hidden field. Actually, I'll just do it as a straight HTML just to keep it simple. So I'll say type equals hidden. Name equals current photo equals photo. I'm not sure why it's giving me this warning. I'll just ignore it. No, I should have a closing slash. Should be there. I'm going to ignore that warning for a minute. I'm going to try it like this. I think it should be correct. And if we view the source, it should show us the existing image name. Just going to try it and see. So I'll just refresh my view here where I have a photo. Okay, we'll just take that out for a second. Okay. So if I take that hidden out, works. Well, the value should have it. Sorry, where did you put the quotations? I have a quotation here. Okay. Hang on. Try this. So hidden for. Oh, it's got to be this. Okay, this may do the trick. We'll just use the razor syntax. I'll use a hidden for with our model being equal to model dot. We're getting warmer. Well, whoops, new. There, this should do it. We're going to call it current photo, and it will display, give us the value of the current image. I think that's what we want. There we go. So we don't see it, but if we view the source, here. So now our value shows the name of the current image. So now we need to rewrite our logic when we're editing that says if no file was uploaded, we need to keep this existing name. Rather than getting the photo from an upload, we want it to be the current value. Otherwise, we're setting it to null and deleting it. So in my product controller, I'm going to go to my edit method. So in here, I'll say else, no new photo, keep the old file name. It's in the product controller in the edit post method. So the method where we're processing the file upload. So now we want to get it from our current photo. So I'm going to add this as a string as one more field that gets submitted. Now we'll look for this current photo. We'll try it like this. Equals. I've added a string parameter here with the same name as our input, our hidden input. And then we're going to read the hidden value. So this should hopefully keep our photo from getting deleted. We'll try it and see what happens. So now I'm going to go to save with a new price, but without a new photo. See if this did the trick. We may have to change this a little bit. We'll see if it works. Okay, so now I can update the price. I haven't lost my photo, so I can put the price back up here. I don't choose a new photo, it keeps the old one. Make sure our upload is working. I'll go back and put my photo back in. We'll make sure we didn't break the upload, which we didn't. So again, I did two things here. I added this parameter to our method. And then I added this else condition. So we're keeping the existing file name if the user doesn't replace the photo. Thank you for pointing out that flaw in our logic. So we've still got some time, which is good. So we want to start dealing now with, there's more things we want to do with this. We want to deal with roles and permissions. So first of all, we want to take this current account we have, and we want to make this account, we want to put it in the administrator role. And then we're going to need to rewrite some of our logic. So it's not only if you're logged in, you can do stuff, you have to be logged in as an administrator to make changes to the products and categories. So there's a quick script on Blackboard I want you to grab for your database. So if you scroll down to the bottom of lesson 6, if you are using my database, please don't run the script. I will run it. If you're working with your own database, there's 3 lines here. So we're going to manually insert an administrator role and a customer role into the ASP.NET roles table, and we'll give those IDs 1 and 2. We will then take whatever user we already have and we'll make that user an administrator. So all you need to do is copy these 3 lines, connect to your database, and just go to the query window once you're connected. Doesn't matter whether it's your Azure database or local. So just click execute. It'll add the 2 roles to the roles table, and it will take this current login that we have, and it will put that user into the administrator role. If I go and run my query again, so we have 3 accounts here, so each one of these is an administrator. So now we're going to create one more account on the website, but this account will not be an administrator. And then we can set up different roles and permissions. So here's the account I want you to create. You can use the same password, but just set it up with the username customer@gc.ca. Again, if you're using my database, you don't have to create this account. I'll create it. So I'll go over here to register, and I'm going to use the exact same password. ABCD123 $. So now I'm logged in as a customer. So here's my new account. But this user is not an administrator. So this user can check out, buy product, shop, and check out, but I don't want them to be able to. So right now, as a authenticated user, as a customer, right, I can go to products and I have the ability to add, edit, and delete. Because I'm authenticated. If I go to another window where I'm not logged in, I log off over here, I can't get to the products. Sorry, I can get there, but I can't do anything. So far we've done authentication, but we haven't dealt with authorization, right? We have two different users and they're in different roles. So we want to change some of what we've done. So let's go to in our products controller, this authorize is no longer sufficient because all it's doing is checking if the user's logged in. As long as I'm logged in, I can change all the data. That's no good. So we can specify here, but notice we want to specify this. We can either allow specific users or specific roles. So I'm going to pick roles equals. What should go in here? What role do we want? Right, we want it's got to match exactly what we put in the database, right? So in the database, we created as administrator. So we now want to allow that same role. If you're an administrator, not only do you have to be logged in, but you also have to be in the database in the administrator role. Except for the index method. Anybody can still get to our product list. But now only an administrator can create, edit, or delete a product. So again, we can do this either at the controller level or one method at a time, however we want to. So let's look at what happens now. So as an administrator, I can go and create a new product. But as a customer, okay. That's interesting. Let's just check here. So my user ID starts with 43. Let's check. User ID 43 is in role ID 1, is administrator. Interesting. So what happened? So as a customer, I can't get in. Let's log off and log back in for a minute. I'm logged in as administrator. Can view the list of products. Okay, I just had to log out and log in because the roles get attached to us when we log in. So once you log in, any roles that belong to that user are attached to that user object. So I just had to log out and log back in. So now I can get here with my admin account, but as a customer, I can see the list of products, but I can no longer add, edit, or delete. I'm locked out. Because our restriction is not only now that a user has to be identified, but they have to be in a specific role to get here. We'll also need to make some changes to the view. What will we need to change on our products index view? Right, because all of our if statements are just checking, is the user identified or anonymous? We now need to check beyond that. Not enough that they're identified, they have to be in the right role. So just checking the request isn't enough anymore. All this tells us is this person logged in, yes or no? Doesn't tell us what are they allowed to do. So in this case, we're going to use, we need not the request object, we're going to need to check the user object in this case. So user dot, what do you think we want to check here from the little context menu? Yeah, let's check. It has an is in role. What role are we looking for? Right. It's got to be exactly, what's the name? What do we call it in the database? Well, in our database, we called it administrator. So that's the name of the role. So now we're not just checking their identity, we're checking what role are they in. If they're in the administrator role, they can see the create new. So we'll just check this, and if this works, we'll need to change it down here as well as down here. So I'm logged in as a customer. So we're hoping this link is going to go away now. Okay, so I'm anonymous here. If I log in with my customer account, so my create new link has disappeared. I'm logged in, but I'm not in the right role. As an administrator, I can still see this link. So we'll want to change those other two if statements the same way on this view. So this column heading and these links only show up if the user is in an administrator role. So I'll just copy this line from line 10 and I'll replace it down on line 29. And I'll also replace it here. So if user is in role. So now this page is serving two purposes. It shows products to anybody, but only administrators see the links to add, edit, and delete. So there's no need for a rebuild here. We'll just check it again, make sure as an administrator I still see everything, which I do, create, and here's all my links. But as a customer, I get this. I can see the data, but I have no links to change it. And even if I try, my controller locks me out. So we have full control over who can go where and who can see what. And typically to secure our application, we need to use it both places. We need to use authorize and the roles in the controller. And then we also need to show or hide things in some of our views. Right? We don't have to modify, we didn't have to modify, create, edit, or delete because an anonymous user or a customer, they can't even load those views. So we didn't need to make any changes to the HTML there. So if we wanted to hide this link, so maybe we want to hide our categories link for anybody but administrators, right? As a customer, I'm locked out, I added authorize at the top of my categories controller. At least I meant to. Oh, all right, we'll do it in here too. So in the categories controller, let's also limit this to administrators. So if you're not an administrator, we're not letting you in here at all. You can't even see the list of categories. We'll build a separate page for public use for someone to shop, but it will be a different view from this. So I'll just compile. And now I can't even get to the list of categories as a customer. This should lock me out. Bounce me to log in. So if we're going to lock access to this page so that only an administrator can see it, we also want to hide that link so only administrators get it when they log in. So in our nav bar for this link, we want to restrict that to administrators only. We can go back to our layout file, wrap this link inside of an if statement. Go to layout. Now products, we're letting customers see. So with products, we're just checking the request object. Here, need to again check the user. So the categories link is only for administrators. No one else will even see it. But there's no errors. You can load the page in the browser. Make sure you spelled administrator correctly. And make sure you have a browser tab where you are logged in as an administrator. So as with my admin account, I can see the link. But as a customer, I don't even see categories. So we can use that is in role check in our views to show and hide things. So that's most of what we need in terms of dealing with authorization for roles and permissions. We use roles equal in the controller, and we can use the user.isInRole in the views to tell us which role this particular user is in. Okay, so we've done a bunch of these things. Let's see, there's two other things I'd like to do. We'll see if we can do them quickly. Here's one. We should look at enabling SSL. Okay? SSL is now more important than ever. What do SSL certificates even do? Why do we need them? Yeah, because normally any traffic between any browser and a web server, the request and response is all sent in plain text. So if anybody intercepts, you're putting in your password or your credit card number, anyone who intercepts that request that you're sending to the server, they can easily read the data. So SSL certificates, they encrypt. Now, SSL has become even more important for two reasons, both of which are due to Google. A few years ago, Google announced that they would rank sites higher in their search engine results if they had SSL certificates, and they would penalize sites that didn't use them, which is a really good reason to get an SSL certificate. We can see, I think, these two pages both use SSL certificates. How can you tell? There's a couple of visual cues. Giselle? Right, so it's not using the plain old HTTP protocol, it's using S, which stands for secure. What's the other visual indicator? Yeah, we've got this little lock, and if you click it, right, we can view information about the SSL certificate. Where did they buy it? You can see the certificate. When does it expire? So not only does this affect Google search engines, but Google also announced a few years ago they were going to start doing this. They were supposed to start doing it last June. But Google is now, sorry, Chrome will now mark any site that doesn't use an SSL. Show you what it looks like if I could spell. Right. So Chrome now does this. Any site that doesn't use SSL, it marks as not secure. Even if the site is just static HTML, right? There's no database, there's no logins, there's nothing secure at all. Chrome will display it like this to people. So what are most people going to do when they see a red not secure beside the URL of the website? What will they do? Yeah, they're going to leave. They're going to think, oh, I'm going to get a Trojan, I'm going to get a virus. I need to leave this website. So for all of these reasons, every site should have SSL, and it should be enabled. Okay? Not only should be enabled, what will happen? Let's say I try and take out the S here. So I want to reload this page, but without the SSL encryption. What will happen when I hit enter? Sorry? Comes right back. So if I try and make that request without the SSL, there's a script on here checking. No. So it's one thing to set the SSL up, but then the other thing is we have to force all requests to go through the HTTPS version. We can do this in our ASP.NET application in one line of code, but we want to force all the requests to use the SSL certificate. Okay. Now, Azure actually gives us the SSL certificate already, which is cool. So on Azure, I'll load the site, but I may be able to load it without SSL. We'll see. So I'm going to show you how, with one line of code in Visual Studio, we can force all requests to use HTTPS. So I'll load the home page, and then I'll try to reload it without the security certificate. Generally, you guys have to buy these for your customers. They don't know how to set them up. And then you have to pay attention to the renewal notices so they don't expire. Because when they expire, this is what users see. Typically looks something like this. Right? The browsers don't want to let you into pages that have SSL certificates that have expired. So if I go here and take out the HTTPS, we'll see if it loads. Aha. So there's no forcing. So my site can run without HTTPS, which we don't want. We don't want Chrome to mark it as not secure, for example. See if it does. You can see Chrome says not secure. So this isn't ideal. And if I'm trying to improve my search engine performance, this is going to hurt it. So we need to do two things. The first thing is we need to generate a self-signed certificate in Visual Studio. So when we run it through localhost, we can run it now on HTTPS locally. The second thing we need to do is add one line of code that will force, like we saw on Blackboard, it'll force this request back to HTTPS if it's not on. So we'll go up to our web project and I'll right click it. Actually, sorry, easiest thing is I'll just turn on my properties window here. So notice what we see. When I choose the web project, you'll see a few properties here. SSL enabled is false. Here's the URL, but that's our HTTP version. If we change this to true, it's going to generate a new URL that will start with HTTPS. So I'm going to change where it says SSL enabled from false to true. And this isn't going to cooperate. Okay, I got to just change something in mine. You should be allowed to do it. I have one little. Let's see here. Oops, okay, I'll try that again. I'm going to change false to true. Okay, I don't know I'm going to be able to do it on mine. Because I've used up, it's saying I've used up all of my SSL ports. 44.3. Let's try it this way. So it should assign you a port between 44,000, I think, and 4,500. 380? Okay, I'm just going to try it. 87? It's just random, so it shouldn't really matter. I may have to do it here. You should just be able to change your Are you able to change yours from false to true? Okay, if you're able to change yours from false to true, that's good. Here's the line of code you need. In the app start folder, there's a filter config. We're going to open this up. We're going to force all requests to use SSL. Here's the line you need. Filters.add new if you add this line into this register global filters, build and start your server again, it should now start your HTTPS version on the new port. And if you take out the S from the URL, it will automatically redirect you to the same page with HTTPS. So there's our one new line once we enable SSL on the project. So you will need to then click debug and start without debugging again, because it's going to load the HTTPS version on a different port number that will start with 44. Because 443 is IIS's SSL port. So again, this is in app start filter config. We are requiring HTTPS for all requests. So if I push this up to GitHub now, I should be able to try it. I can't run it locally, but I can check it on Azure. Should work. So I'll try my everything store again. I'll just give it a minute to push to Azure. Huh. Couldn't find the favicon. That's interesting. Not sure where that file went. Not sure where my favicon has gone. I will just grab another one. I don't have it there either. Okay, I'll exclude that from my project for now. So we'll try and deploy again, and then we'll see whether our SSL is being forced if I take out the S in my URL. Okay, so that succeeded. So now if I refresh, so notice I'm in the HTTP version, right? There's no certificate showing up. If I refresh it, I should get redirected now to a secure version of this page. So notice now, just by doing a refresh, we've got the lock and HTTPS. If I try and go anywhere and take the S out and just go to the HTTP version, redirects me to the secured version of the same page. So that's what this line of code we've added does, right? It checks for any requests that are not using SSL and redirects us to the same page using SSL. Take your question in 1 second. Locally? Yeah, mine won't work locally either, so I'm gonna have to comment this out. But if you put the code in and push it to GitHub, it will work on Azure. Okay, because mine's not working locally either. So if we go and look at the certificate, we've got a certificate here. So the reason we have a certificate is this is called a wildcard. So it's issued to anything.azurewebsites.net. And all of our sites are subdomains of azurewebsites.net. If we had our own domain, right, if we had emiliosite.com, we'd need to go and buy an SSL certificate and register it to emiliosite.com. Okay, and that's a bit of a process. I'll show you quickly what that process looks like, how it works. I had to do this for a client just the other day. Oh, look at a different one. So normally there's a few steps involved. Typically, you can buy the SSL certificates directly from the web host, but they cost more. They typically charge you $50 to $100 per year for a certificate. So what I prefer to do instead is buy them myself here. Much less expensive here. But when you buy them from a third party, you have to do some back and forth between yourself, the certificate issuer, and the hosting company. You buy it from the hosting company, you just say, I want a certificate for this domain. You pay the $50 or $100, which you charge your customer, and they do it. So there's all kinds of different certificates with different encryption levels. If you're not doing anything too sensitive, the basic ones start at this much a year. So this is what this looks like. Let's see. So the first thing you have to do is go to the hosting company. You have to give them information about the domain and the owner of the site, and they generate this. It's called the certificate request. So they'll give you this. It's generated on the web server. You've then got to take this value and go to a certificate issuer, and when you buy the certificate, you have to include the request from the server. So the certificates are not transferable from one server to another. If you move a site from one server to another host, guess what? New SSL certificate. You can't transfer it. So you get it, you buy the certificate here, and when you buy it, you give them, here's the domain name I want to secure, and here's the certificate request from the host. They will generate the certificate and they'll email it to you, or they'll email you a link. You download it. So here's what the certificate might look like. It's a bunch of files. So here's the certificate. So it gives me a zip, and inside there's various files for the SSL. Right? So they look something like this. There's your certificate. So then you have to upload these files to the web server and let somebody know in the hosting company, hey, here's the certificates on the server now, can you please install it? So this may take a little while, so you don't want to wait till the very last minute when the certificate's about to expire. And typically you buy them for a year. So when you start getting the notices saying, hey, your SSL's coming up for renewal, you need to process the renewal. Otherwise, people get this big SSL expired warning that chases everyone away from the website. So it is a bit of a process. You will have to do this. You're a web developer for every site you ever build. Your customers are not going to generate SSL certificates, put them on the server. That's our responsibility, right? We don't want the sites marked as not secure. We don't want users going around the certificate. We don't want to let them expire. So we need to stay on top of this and go through that process. Okay. So we sort of dealt with this. I'm just going to show you guys one other thing. We didn't get to do social login. We will do that after reading week. Okay, we'll look at how do we do, at the very minimum, Google login. Once we can do one, doing Microsoft, Facebook, they're all fairly similar. So we'll at least do Google login after the exam, after reading week. I will just point you to one link because it talks to some of these other things you guys mentioned. SQL injection, brute force, and cross-site scripting. Just want to show you one quick link here. We're not going to make any more changes. I'll let you go in a minute. This is something we should all be aware of. So one of the former students in the program now runs a cybersecurity business. He's been very successful. He was head of application security at Royal Bank for a few years. He just gone out on his own. He started his own business. And he said, please, Rich, do me a favor. When you teach the lesson on .NET application security, show everybody the OWASP top 10. Okay. So there's a working group of developers and security professionals, and every few years they publish a list of the 10 most common web application security flaws, and they update it. So they haven't done a list for a couple of years. Here is the list. I won't read this whole thing to you, I'm just linking, but I just want to show it to you, and you should have a look at it. No, there won't be midterm questions coming out of here. Okay. So just what's on here, I'll just show you really quickly. So here was the list from 2013. So you guys named actually 3 of the top 10. The very first one, SQL injection. Cross-site scripting was another one. Okay. And remember, that's why in ASP.NET we use those form tokens, that validation of the form tokens that prevents the cross-site scripting. So these are the things that are most common. And then they've got sections on each one outlining what the risks are. So here's, for example, examples of SQL injection. And how do we mitigate this? So this is a really handy guide and checklist for you if you're out working as a web developer about what are the big risks. And there's tools in there that help us, learn how do we deal with these threats? What kind of things do we need to implement? Using ASP.NET Identity, it does a lot of this stuff for us, which is great. But this list gets updated every few years, and it's something that we should all stay on top of. Particularly because a lot of you are going to wind up as web developers when you're out of school working. And these things will be a constant for us that we've got to manage new security risks to our projects. Okay, so today's code is already on GitHub. I'll stop my video stream. Angela, I know you had a question, and I will see you guys next week. Remember, try to come early to give yourself maximum time for this.